Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's always a delight to be back at the IES, and I'm very grateful to Jeroen and to the IES colleagues, and also to the Anglo-American Studies programme, and especially also to my friend Brad Barber for his support of my work when I come back to the United States. It's wonderful to see so many people here in what clearly is the central issue in European and British politics. And I hope to speak for about 20 to 25 minutes and then just have a conversation. Just have questions, a free exchange of ideas, and I'm sure points of clarification. What I really wanted to start by saying, and the important thing is to kind of do a little bit of light background work, because we might be at different levels of our following of the European press, is just to reiterate the fact that two and a bit years ago the United Kingdom had a referendum on whether it wanted to stay a member of the European Union. This was the largest democratic activity in the history of the United Kingdom, with 33 million citizens participating. An exceptionally narrow result of 52 to 48%, 17.4 million said we'd like to leave, please, and 16.1 said no, 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 we need to remain. So at a political level, our country is divided. But it's actually divided, I would argue, on a deeper level, a more troubling level. It's divided on a level of values. In other words, especially within England, within the four nations of the United Kingdom, about who are the English and what type of England do they want to build. And I think that really is at the heart of the questioning of the continued membership of the European project, the European political, economic and social union. So in principle, the notion of Brexit means leaving those institutions, those numerous and often very complex institutions that we understand as the European Union, and to leave them actually in relatively short period of time. Our Prime Minister last year, Theresa May, Conservative Prime Minister over a minority government, triggered Article 50, which set the clock running, a 24-month clock. We have 6 months to go before the United Kingdom exits. Now, of course, we've had one other country exit. We've had Greenland, but it was a long, long time ago, and it's not quite comparable. I think we'd all agree. But nonetheless, the United Kingdom has 6 months before it exits the EU. And at the moment, well, I don't think, if I was talking about 3 months ago, if I was here 3 months ago, I would have said that the United Kingdom and Her Majesty's government and the EU and Michel Barnier were in negotiation. I'm not quite sure I would use the word negotiation at present. They're in something, but negotiations perhaps not the most appropriate or apposite term to use. Key issues, ladies and gentlemen, you might know some of them. The notion of a divorce bill. How much, if the United Kingdom seeks a negotiated Brexit, in other words, a soft Brexit, how much will they pay for the privilege of such a soft negotiated Brexit and its concomitant benefits, carrying on within a single market or perhaps a customs union? And so with that, the next most important issue really is trade. And how do the two parties envisage future trade in goods? Especially in goods, actually, because rather than services, because you're talking about how does one physically get goods to market? Is it going to be a frictionless, seamless border? Is there going to be a sense of almost like free trade? Is it a free trade agreement? Or is there going to be some kind of tariff having to be collected by both parties during the movement and exchange of goods within this soft negotiated Brexit? The other thing that's captured many people's attention, especially when I come back to the United States, people who have a family and deep connection with the island of Ireland, be it in the north or the south, is what about Northern Ireland? And what about the United Kingdom's border between the north, Northern Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland? So that has also been something that's been much hotly debated, and we will come back to that. And the fourth one I'd just like to flag up, and I think this one actually is to be honest, and I'm quite optimistic about this, is the one I think will be most, there's a broad degree of consensus on, is the rights of EU citizens who are currently domiciled in the UK. And then, you know, a corollary of that, you know, that those UK citizens, sunbirds, to use a North American term, often seniors who are living in the Mediterranean because the damp and clammy environment of England or Scotland is perhaps not as appealing as a temperate Mediterranean climate. But I'm more optimistic about that. We'll come back. So these are the key issues, friends. But this talk is entitled A View from Britain Towards Brexit ? Because I think what's happened over the summer is we've kind of crossed the Rubicon. We've reached the point, actually, to use an American phrase, where the rubber hits the road. In as much as the Prime Minister has set her political capital out on a brokered agreement that takes the name of her Grace and Favour House in Buckinghamshire, Chequers, where countless American presidents, especially in the post-war era, have been entertained, and famously the Maggie and Ronnie show, but others, you know. And the government was called there, and they were hunkered down there to agree, again, using the word advisedly, a plan. A negotiated plan that would set out a softer Brexit. So a Brexit that is not cutting all institutional and political ties with the European Union. And what this plan led to, I guess, was very swiftly afterwards, was a white paper, which was then presented to Parliament, 12th of July. And it set out a form of free trade area, some customs arrangements about the movement of goods, free movement for workers, not for all citizens in EU countries coming to the UK, or UK citizens moving to the EU, but for workers. So I guess if one has a job or one needs to hire people, so that was the focus, workers. So that's a very particular point and an important point to hold on to. And a notion of a common rule book, because if you're going to have a customs arrangement, you need a common rule book. In other words, the United Kingdom government was proposing that the UK would follow the EU common rule book for agricultural goods and manufacturing goods. But therefore, if you follow the common rule book, you have to follow the common rule giver, or the rule enforcer, which I guess would be, which it is, the European Court of Justice. So if there was a dispute, it would go up to that. So this is a softer Brexit. This is saying we'll still be partly under ECJ jurisdiction. We are actually going to be following some of the rules which United Kingdom, over a 40-year membership, has actually helped construct. You know, this is not some sort of imposition from a foreign power. United Kingdom has been a member. Yes, like Stephen George, the academic, says, often an awkward partner. But I always make the point, I've made the point in my lecture last year at the IES about Brexit and its aftershocks, that whether it's been a Conservative government or a Labour government, that which Her Majesty's government has signed up to in various European treaties, they generally have kept their word. They have had opt-outs, single currency, tax harmonisation, foreign policy, naturally. But that which Labour and Conservative governments, whether it's Edward Heath or Margaret Thatcher or Jim Callaghan or Wilson or Blair or Major, that which they have actually signed up to, they've gone along with. I guess you could juxtapose that with an incredibly important and central European member, close proximity across a small body of water to the United Kingdom, that perhaps signs up to everything, but has a kind of in theory and in practice view about implementation. Enough said. You're all good Europeanists, you'll figure that out. So this was where the Prime Minister drew her line in the sand, tried to assert her authority over her cabinet, which was divided. The cabinet, the executive committee of British parliamentary government, was divided, as is her party, the Conservative Party, deeply divided, as is the country. So this is what she set out to do. The response from Brexiteers, from key people within her cabinet, was resignations. David Davis, the Secretary of State for Brexit, yes, there was an office and a title set up, Secretary of State for Brexit, for leaving the EU. He resigned on principle because of this, as did his assistant, the Undersecretary Steve Baker, and then a day or two later, the Foreign Secretary. So probably the third most important senior person in government after Prime Minister and Chancellor, Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. And they resigned on the fact that this deal, the Chequers plan, was too much of a compromise, too much of a giveaway, and it wasn't in line with the will of the British people who voted to leave. In other words, it wasn't a Brexit at all. It was a keeping one toe in the EU and one out, one foot in, one out. So for them, that was just not acceptable. And they also felt showing that to Michel Barnier, showing that to the European Union, showing that to the Commission, was tantamount to saying, OK, now come and bargain harder with us, because you see how weak we are, you see how divided we are. Because whilst negotiations have been ongoing, they are fluid, they are dynamic. It's almost like the opening gambit, the second gambit, it's not done until it's done. So what about towards a hard Brexit? We talked about a soft, but what's a hard Brexit? Well, in one sense, a hard Brexit, a hard leaving of the EU, is a no-deal Brexit. No formal deal with the EU. Some people describe that as a falling out of the European Union on the 29th of March next year, and therefore falling onto the WTO framework. The WTO legal international trading framework. Now you have a group of Eurosceptics, MPs, Conservative MPs, the European Research Group. This group's been going since the 1990s, in opposition initially to the Maastricht Treaty. Sir Michael Spicer was the chairman, and it has had various iterations. And Jacob Rees-Mogg is the leading figure. He's the leading backbench, traditional conservative, Eurosceptic, free marketeer, free trader, and he's now chairing this. And their response is to produce a counter Chequers plan, and they have been supporting a group called Economists for Free Trade that are seeking to promote and prosecute the argument that actually falling out of the EU onto WTO terms, if you're a free trader, so if you're not for protectionism, if you're not for tariffs, and goodness me, I was at a North America summit yesterday with Canadians and Americans and Mexicans who are deeply, deeply concerned about the rising spectre of protectionism, of 25% tariffs on steel and 10% tariffs on aluminum, and that tariffs on Canadian and American steel, and particularly when one understands supply chain, and that countries now don't build the entire product, they don't build the entire good. It's not a fully American car, it's not a fully Canadian truck or a fully Mexican motorbike. There's a supply chain, and bits and bobs are produced and manufactured through our economic trading partners. And so protectionism really is not just economically, but actually diplomatically, not, in an incredibly interdependent world, not the best route to go. Down, in many people's view, I'm no economist, but I'm a free trader instinctively. So this is a very clear free trade view. Now look, it does have its drawbacks, there's no two ways, but it comes down to whether you feel that the EU and the UK, and the UK leaving the EU, is purely a rational decision predicated on trying to make Britain richer, or whether you take the view, which I take the view, that leaving the EU is as much about one's heart as one's head. It's as much about what happens here as it is about what happens here. In other words, especially the English. Who are the English? Who do the English want to be in the world? What do they think about sovereignty? What do they think about patriotism? What do they think about the shared values? In a globalised, multi cultural world. So I think, in a way, if you take a free trade position, you could argue that actually you can be sceptic of the European Union and actually still be pro-European, but you're a European Union member sceptic for the UK, and seek to have good partnerships because you're seeking to trade. And if you trade with nations, if you trade with individuals, you're less likely to come into conflict with them. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the really powerful arguments for free trade. And if I might make a slight segue, but I don't think it's completely irrelevant, that was really what many of the colleagues yesterday at the North America Summit at the Council on State Governments West annual meeting were saying, that it's so important in this era of real sharp polarisation that free trade almost be a moniker, free trade almost be the imprimatur of American politics. In an era of low level of civility and a high level of polarisation, who we trade with, how we make money, actually binds nations and governments a wee bit closer together. And so, there's something there about free trade, I think. So you can actually still have a very free trade view and want lots of free trade between the UK and the EU and have that partnership and that friendship, but not necessarily be under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, the Common Rule Book, be under that kind of federal project, which I don't think anyone is claiming it's not. It clearly is, since Maastricht, yet still be European, yet still be for market capitalism, yet still be for social safety net, and in an incredibly polarised era. What about public opinion? Well, it's interesting. I was looking at the data very recently, and YouGov, one of the leading polling companies in the UK, other polling companies are available, I must say, but YouGov, a leading polling company, said that actually when you look at the polls it's done just in 2018, only a 3-point difference, so it's pretty tight, but there are a few more people, when asked, actually saying, I'm not sure if Brexit's such a good idea. Also they're saying, they think most people think, when asked, that the EU's had the upper hand, that the UK government, hasn't been united. That's very true. I think they feel the EU's had the upper hand precisely because we're so deeply divided, and the government's divided, and the Tory party's divided. But also, a pretty sizable amount, nearly 70%, weren't really aware of the Chequers deal. There's so much information. It's so dynamic. Things are changing all the time. There are so many talking heads on TV, point to counterpoint, point to counterpoint. The man on the street can't keep up with all of it. I mean, so in a way, I understand that. I appreciate that. So public opinion, I think, is shifted a wee bit towards, oh my gosh, is this really the right thing? But at the same time, I think only anecdotally, if you're a Remainer, I think you're much more of a Remainer now. I think in a way people have become not more moderate towards coalescing towards agreement. People know on the Remain side that we are going to leave, the United Kingdom's going to leave, and that actually, that stirs the passion in them, and they're getting, they're using every right. They're using all the tools they have of argument and lobbying, and those on who have a public profile to try and make the argument that this is bad, as is their right. And I think the same goes for those who are very committed to Brexit. If you'd like, you can just make a note of that. It's just, if you just type into Google, how public feels about Brexit, YouGov, you'll get all the data and all the graphs, if that's what you're into. So, just concluding now, towards a change politics, there's an awful lot in the national conversation at the moment that UK politics is broken. We've had it. That's not a new thing. We've had that at different times in the post-war period. We've had that before. We've had it in the 19th century with the rotten boroughs, and we've had it, with a whole range of things. But in the post-war era, we have had it a few different periods. And what I'd like to say about that is the spectre of a second referendum, a second full referendum. In other words, do we want to run this again because public opinion has changed a tiny bit? Do we want to run this again because, quite frankly, the Prime Minister has no clear authority? Her deal was ravaged in the White Paper, the Chequers plan was ravaged in the House of Commons. So, and you might think, yes, but goodness me, what a big deal. But the fact is it's coming from the mouths of incredibly powerful, incredibly influential people former Prime Minister Tony Blair is the chief cheerleader for that cause, but Gordon Brown and Sir John Major, so on the centre-right and the centre-left, there's lots of people saying this is what we want. Some are saying we need it because of where we're at. Some are still banging the drum that the British people were duped, that 17 million people were fooled. I find that, I don't think there's any evidence for that at all. For that logic to follow, you need to prosecute an argument to say that now all of a sudden, you know, the scales have fallen from the rise and they now have the truth, but back then they didn't, and I just don't think there's any data to back that up, quite frankly. You can say there was exaggerations, absolutely, on both sides about how much money we'd get back and whether the NHS would receive lots of money, absolutely large exaggerations. But then on the Leave side, you know, David Cameron brought President Obama in, you know, a very cool, popular guy, to say, well, I'm not really sure you should be doing this sort of stuff. So I think there was politicking on both sides, right? So the next point, really, and this is the thing that I find fascinating, there's talk among the Labour moderates of a new party, a centre party. We had that in 1981, the SDP, the right wing of the Labour Party, broke away because Michael Foot was leading, but more importantly, Tony Benn, and I guess a more hardline socialism, what some would call a Labour Marxism, was controlling the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party, and it was actually dictating the manifesto. Well, Tony Benn's acolyte is the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn. He's Her Majesty's leader of the opposition, and an awful lot of people have left the Labour Party, but Jeremy Corbyn has grown the Labour Party. It's got 500,000 members, the largest political organisation in Western Europe. Lots of people have rejoined the party, some just regular leftists, others Trotskyites, and people who were removed from the party by Neil Kinnock in the mid-1980s. But the point is that an awful lot of the moderate Social Democrats in that European kind of Social Democratic tradition, they are saying what we need now is a change, partly because we're going to get a Brexit, and it's those very moderate progressives, they are really wedded to the idea of the EU because they think it keeps us free and keeps us rich and keeps us civilised. That's what they would argue. More on that later, perhaps. But at the same time, they are looking into their own internal conversation and thinking, my gosh, these radicals, these socialist campaign group MPs, these Labour Marxists, John McDonnell, Diane Abbott, Jeremy Corbyn, are in the ascendant. And so really, is the Labour Party a busted flush? Should we not have a centre party? The difficulty for them is that our electoral system has an inbuilt bias for two parties. And we know what happens if you have an insurgent third centre ground party, the SDP, had it in 1981, for precisely the reason of jettisoning what they saw, a real leftist Labour Party, and it split the left and the centre vote. Margaret Thatcher had a majority, the Tories were cock-a-hoop with that. So I can imagine that if there was a centre party, it would be crucial whether that centre party pivoted right or pivoted centre-left. If it pivoted centre-left, I think exactly the same thing would happen. It would be the SDP Mark II. If it pivoted right, then it could lead on to the fourth point there, which for some people would be nirvana. It would be Perusia, the second coming in a political sense. Jeremy Corbyn as leader. That might go down well with some undergraduates here at Cal, I would imagine. But for other people, I think it would be deeply troubling. And also people are flagging up the issue of maybe the Tories need to change leader. I think Boris Johnson was flirting with that idea when he resigned, but I think he thought better of it because it would be difficult now, in a way, 6 months to Brexit, at least let Brexit occur, and then once we're in a muddle, in a mess, or we are liberated, whichever way you want to look at it, then challenge an incumbent Prime Minister who lost her party's majority at the 2017 general election and say now is a time for a new conservatism. I just want to end, friends, just with this little quotation. I said to you, I think Brexit is as much about the heart as it is the head, much about feeling as it is about data, much about how people's lived everyday experience influences their view of Britain's membership of the EU as it is about statistics and data. And I wrote a piece that's going to be coming out with a number of academics, led by Professor Matt Beech of the Centre for British Studies here. It's going to probably be coming out next year, And I'll just read you the little conclusion because it just sums up kind of what I think. The phenomenon of Brexit has brought into sharp focus the fact that the social fabric of the United Kingdom is riven by the values gap. The values gap refers to the conflicting set of ethical values that characterise British and especially English society. These sharply differing sets of values held by citizens who share much in common in terms of ethnicity, language and culture explain the contrasting outlooks in many issues, from Brexit to gay marriage, from the Human Rights Act to patriotism. It's the principal factor behind the socio-cultural division in contemporary British politics. Brexit is neither the cause of a disunited kingdom, nor is it the origin story. In fact, Brexit is a consequence of the growing values gap in British and especially in English society. Thank you very much.
Thank you.